Story 1. The Grinning Man. The nightmare didn't end the night I shut myself in my bedroom, locked away from the horror that had been following me. No, it only grew worse. The darkness in my house, the unsettling silence that had consumed every inch of my home, felt suffocating. The longer I stayed here, the more it felt as though the house itself was closing in on me, pushing me further into the grip of whatever force had taken hold of my mind. I couldn't sleep. The haunting image of the man's grin, the wide, stretched mouth, his empty eyes, kept replaying in my head. It was as if his image was burned into my brain, haunting my every waking moment. It wasn't just a face anymore, it was him. That thing, that presence. It knew me. It knew everything about me. And it wanted me to become just like it. The feeling of being watched never went away. I could still feel its eyes on me, even when I was alone in my room. And it was always there, just outside of my vision, lingering in the corners of my mind, waiting for the right moment to strike. I tried to ignore it, tried to convince myself it was all in my head. But the whispers started again, low at first, almost like a wind through the trees. Then they grew louder. Not just whispers, but words. Low, guttural voices hissing like something speaking from the deepest, darkest pit of the earth. It started when I was working late one night at my computer. I was trying to finish up some work, but the whispers were growing, becoming harder to ignore. It was as if they were inside my head, echoing through my skull. I could barely focus. Every time I tried to concentrate, I felt a cold breath on my neck, a brush of air that wasn't from the fan, that wasn't from the open window. It was real. I knew it was real. And then, as if on cue, I heard it, the sound of the door opening. I turned quickly, my heart hammering in my chest, but there was nothing. The door was still shut. The house was still silent, as it had been for days. I could hear my breath, shaky and uneven, filling the silence, and I forced myself to look away from the door. There was no one there. But the whispers, they were louder now. I heard the sound of slow footsteps dragging across the floor, approaching from the hallway. My stomach twisted into knots. The shadows in my room seemed to grow darker, stretching, creeping toward me like they were alive. The air grew thick, suffocating, and the room seemed to grow colder with every step. I couldn't move. I was frozen, paralyzed by fear. The footsteps continued, growing louder, closer, until they were right outside my door. And then they stopped. The silence was deafening. I knew, I felt it. The figure was standing just outside. I could almost see it, feel its presence through the door. It was there. I could sense it, like a weight pressing against the very walls of my room, suffocating the air. I wanted to scream, to run, to do something, but I couldn't. I was trapped in my own mind, trapped by the terror that was slowly consuming me. I don't know how long I sat there, my eyes fixed on the door, my pulse racing in my ears. But eventually, the silence was broken. A soft tapping. I jumped, my breath catching in my throat. The tap came again, light but insistent. It was coming from the door, as if something or someone was trying to get in. I mustered the courage to move, to get up, but my legs felt like jelly. I stumbled to the door, my hand shaking as I reached for the handle. The tapping stopped the moment my hand touched the door. For a moment, everything was still. I hesitated. With one final breath, I pulled the door open. Nothing. The hallway was empty. The house was silent. The whispering had stopped, and the air was eerily still. I stepped out cautiously, my eyes darting around the dark hallway. It was as if the house had become a maze, the walls shifting, the shadows closing in on me. The light from the hallway seemed far away, and I felt like I was walking in a dream, disconnected from reality. I reached the living room, the hairs on the back of my neck standing on end. The windows were all shut. There was no breeze, no sound. The house was dark, too dark, like it had swallowed the light itself. I turned to go back to my room when I saw it again. The figure. It was standing at the far end of the living room, just outside the reach of the dim light. Its silhouette was barely visible, but I could see it clearly. Its skin, stretched tight over its face, was nearly translucent. Its grin, wide and unnatural, was the only thing I could see clearly. I could feel its eyes burning into me, even though it had no eyes. It was smiling at me, its mouth stretching wider, impossibly wide. I wanted to run, I needed to run, but I was frozen, unable to move. The figure began to glide toward me, its body twisting and shifting in ways that didn't seem possible. The room around me seemed to close in, the walls contracting as though the house itself was shrinking, suffocating me. I turned to run, but I felt its presence behind me. The weight of it, the dark force that was always one step ahead. It was inside me now, in my mind, in my blood. The whispers were louder, more urgent. It was as if the house itself was alive, and the figure, whatever it was feeding off my fear. I reached the stairs, my feet stumbling beneath me, and I ran up, desperate to get away from the thing that was following me. But as I reached the top, I heard it. The grin. I couldn't escape. It was always there, in my mind, in my thoughts. And I could feel it now, closer than ever. The pounding in my chest was deafening. My legs were on the verge of collapsing beneath me as I reached the top of the stairs. My hand was still gripping the banister, but the panic surged through me like a flood, drowning out everything. The grin, the face, the eyes, if they could even be called eyes, burned in my memory. I could still hear the whispers, feel the weight of the figure pressing down on me from every direction. I thought somehow that by running, by hiding, I could escape. But as I turned to look back down the hallway, I realized just how wrong I was. It was there, at the end of the hallway, the figure. It was standing motionless, just like it had in the living room. But now it was closer. The distance between us had shortened, and I could feel its presence drawing closer with each passing second. The shadows around it seemed to shift, to bend, distorting in ways that weren't natural. It was not human. I knew that much now. It took a step forward. Its movements were unnatural, slow but deliberate, gliding as though it wasn't bound by the laws of nature. Every step felt like a beat of a drum, each footfall reverberating in my mind, drowning out every other sound. My body was stiff, like it was no longer mine, as though I had been locked in place by some invisible force. I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. I wanted to scream. I wanted to beg for help, but the words wouldn't come. The thing, it smiled. Its grin stretched impossibly wide, pulling back the skin of its face, revealing its jagged, sharp teeth. The skin on its face twitched, as if trying to hold the smile in place, but it couldn't. It was too wide, too horrific. I backed up slowly, my body shaking violently as I turned to face the door to my room. I reached for the handle, but my hand wouldn't reach it. It was too far. The air around me felt thick and heavy, like I was suffocating under the weight of something dark. The figure took another step forward, and I heard it. Its voice, soft but unmistakable. "I've been waiting for you." I recoiled, a chill running through me so cold I felt it in my bones. It wasn't just in my head anymore. This thing, whatever it was talking to me, acknowledging my fear, feeding off it. And I realized with a sickening clarity that it had always been there, always watching me. It wasn't just in my house. It was inside me, inside my mind. Its grin was inside my thoughts, inside my very soul. The moment I looked at it, it had taken me, taken everything that made me human. I stumbled back, my breath shallow, my throat tight. The door to my room was just inches away now, but it felt like miles. I reached out, and just as my fingers brushed the handle, I heard the faintest crack. I froze. The sound had come from the walls, but it wasn't just the wood cracking. It was something deeper, something that pulsed. I spun around to face the figure again, but it was no longer standing at the end of the hallway. It was right behind me. It was there, standing just inches away, its face now inches from mine, its grin stretching, that horrible smile that seemed to twist and contort with each passing second. Its mouth opened, revealing rows of teeth, jagged and sharp, dripping with what looked like blood. I could feel its breath on my face, cold and foul, as if it had been buried underground for centuries. And then it whispered, "Come closer." The words slithered into my ears like venom, poisoning my thoughts. I wanted to run, I wanted to get away from it, but I couldn't. My body wouldn't listen. The fear had rooted me in place. I couldn't escape. Not from the grin, not from the darkness that had taken hold of my mind. I screamed, but no sound came out. It was like the air had thickened, suffocated my voice. The figure's grin widened, if that was even possible, as though it was enjoying my torment. Its hollow eyes bored into mine, and I felt my consciousness slipping away. The world around me began to spin. The walls of my house seemed to close in on me, their edges bending and warping like a twisted funhouse mirror. The figure reached out, its hand moving toward my face, its long fingers stretching, elongating in a way that didn't seem possible. "No escape," it murmured, its voice a chorus of echoes, as if it was coming from every direction. The words felt like they were stabbing into my soul. I tried to turn away, tried to break free from its grip, but it was too strong. I felt the cold touch of its fingers on my skin, and I screamed again, this time louder, but still no sound came. The darkness around me deepened, and I felt my body give way to it, collapsing to the floor as the room around me twisted into an impossible, nightmarish landscape. And then everything stopped. The world went dark. For a moment, I was weightless, floating in an endless void. The pressure was gone, the figure was gone. The house, the fear, the overwhelming presence that had haunted me, all of it had vanished. I could hear nothing but the quiet, the silence that seemed both peaceful and unnerving at the same time. But then I heard it again. A tap, a soft, slow tapping sound. I opened my eyes, but everything was dark. The tapping continued, growing louder, more insistent. It wasn't coming from the walls this time. It was coming from inside my head. I could feel it inside me, like a rhythm I couldn't escape. The sound filled my skull, rattling my brain, drowning out all thought. And then a voice, the same whisper. "I've been waiting for you." It was closer now. So close I could feel it brushing against my ear, its breath icy and vile. I tried to scream, but again, no sound escaped. I tried to run, but my legs felt like lead. The tapping continued, faster now, more urgent. It wasn't just the figure anymore. It was everything. It was the darkness itself, and it was closing in on me. I felt the cold hands on my shoulders, and then I felt it. Its grin. It was inside me. Inside my soul, inside my thoughts. It had me. Story 2. The figure in the window. The car crash was sudden. One moment I was driving, the road clear in front of me, and the next, I was staring at a body lying in the street, surrounded by broken glass. The sharp, sickening crack of the impact still rang in my ears. The image of the victim's body sprawled across the cold pavement burned into my mind. I hadn't seen the person until it was too late. His figure had appeared from nowhere, running straight into my path. It wasn't until after the crash, when I came to a halt, that I realized something was horribly wrong. I was in a daze as I stepped out of the car, panic setting in. My breath came out in short, sharp gasps. I walked around the wreck, my legs unsteady, my mind scrambling to process what had just happened. The body in front of me was covered by a dark cloth, the streetlights casting long shadows over it. The car had hit him hard, too hard. I swallowed, my throat dry as dust. My hands shook as I approached the body. It was only when I was a few steps away that I noticed something strange, a twisted, unnatural grin on the face of the man lying in the street. It wasn't just a smile. It was far too wide to be human. The skin around his mouth had been pulled back, stretched into something grotesque. His eyes, once clear and bright, were empty, hollow, like two dark pits that stared at me with a maddening intensity. The smile seemed to grow, stretching even further as I stood frozen in horror. I stumbled back in terror, my mind reeling. What was this? The sound of sirens grew louder in the distance, and the realization that I had hit someone, that I had killed someone, crashed down on me with a wave of nausea. I could feel the panic rising, my chest tightening. The image of the man's grin, the one that seemed to haunt me from every angle, seemed to burn into my brain. I could still see it, still feel it staring at me, even though I had turned away. As the police and paramedics arrived, I stood by my car, too stunned to move. My hands were still trembling, and I couldn't bring myself to look at the body anymore. I could hear the officers speaking to each other, their voices muffled by the roaring of my own thoughts. All I could think about was the face, the man's face, frozen in that horrible, unnatural grin. But it didn't stop there. The officers were asking me questions, their voices distant, like they were coming from somewhere far away. I answered mechanically, too shocked to realize I was still holding on to the door of my car for dear life. I barely even registered their questions, my mind consumed by the image of the man's face. Then, one of the officers walked up to me, his face grim, his eyes scanning me carefully. "Do you know the victim?" he asked. "No," I muttered, my voice thick. "I don't know him." He seemed to consider me for a moment before speaking again. "We'll need you to come to the station. We have a few more questions." I nodded absently, my head still spinning. As they guided me to the back of a police car, I tried to focus on something, anything, to distract myself from the growing terror that was consuming me. But I couldn't escape it. It was the smile, the grin, the way it seemed so wrong, so unnatural. It followed me everywhere, haunting every corner of my mind. By the time we arrived at the station, I felt completely disconnected from reality. I answered questions about the crash, about my driving, about everything that had happened that night, but none of it seemed to matter. Nothing felt real anymore. I kept thinking about the face. The police kept me for hours, asking me the same questions over and over again. I couldn't focus on their words. My mind kept drifting back to the smile, the twisted, jagged smile of the dead man. When I finally left the station, it was already late. I climbed into my car, my thoughts clouded with exhaustion and confusion. The streets were empty as I drove back home, the moon high in the sky casting a pale light on the road ahead. But I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't alone, that something was watching me. I looked into the rearview mirror, my hands gripped tightly on the wheel, and for a brief second, I thought I saw him. The grin. It was there in the reflection, stretching across my face. I whipped around, but of course no one was there. I kept driving, trying to shake the feeling, but it stayed with me. The smile, the eyes, the feeling that I was being followed. The terror grew, gnawing at me until I reached my house. I quickly locked the doors, checked every window, and climbed into bed, my heart still pounding. The silence of the house felt suffocating, like the walls were closing in on me. I tried to sleep, but the images kept flooding back. The grin, the lifeless eyes. But the worst part was when I closed my eyes. The grin wouldn't leave me. It was always there, lurking in the dark corners of my mind. I couldn't escape it. It was inside me now. The next few days passed in a blur. I was barely functioning. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw his face, his smile. I couldn't shake the image of him, couldn't get the feeling out of my head. I tried to go about my life, but everything felt wrong. The world seemed distorted, twisted, like the air had changed. The smile haunted me, followed me. I checked my phone one evening, hoping to distract myself from the anxiety, and noticed a new email from an unfamiliar address. It was marked as spam, the subject line nothing more than a random string of numbers. A feeling of dread washed over me, but I couldn't resist. I opened it. Inside was a picture. The same grin, the same face. The man. It stared at me from the screen, its eyes vacant and cold. The grin was wider now, almost impossibly so. I tried to close the email, but the image stayed with me. The longer I stared at it, the more real it became. I could hear its voice in my head, low, raspy, like it was coming from the deepest corners of my mind. You saw me. And that was when it clicked. The grin, the man. It wasn't just a coincidence. It had followed me from that night. It had followed me home. I looked at the timestamp on the email. January 23rd, 5:35 p.m. The same time I had seen him in the street. He had seen me. The image of the man's twisted smile burned itself into my mind. I tried to shake it off, tried to push it aside. But the more I thought about it, the more real it became. It was like he was with me everywhere I went. That grin, that horrible grin, seemed to follow me, hovering just at the edge of my vision. Always there, always watching. I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw it again. His face, his smile, his hollow, empty eyes staring back at me. It was as if he was in my dreams, in my thoughts, inside my very soul. His presence filled the silence of the night, his laughter echoing through the darkness like a poison. I could feel it growing, his influence seeping into every corner of my life. Days passed, but the feeling didn't go away. If anything, it got worse. I couldn't concentrate at work. I couldn't focus on anything without seeing his face, without hearing that horrible cackling laugh. It wasn't just in my head anymore. It was real. It was happening. I tried everything. I told myself it was stress, that it was just my mind playing tricks on me. I tried ignoring it. I even went to the doctor, hoping they could give me something to calm my nerves, but no medication could erase the images. No therapy could make the feeling of dread go away. The man was still there, always in the background, always lurking. Then, one night, it got worse. I was lying in bed, staring at the ceiling, my mind racing. The house was silent, too silent. I could hear the faintest sound of scratching, like nails running against the walls. I sat up, heart pounding in my chest, the fear rising again. The sound was coming from inside the walls, from within the house. I got up and walked toward the sound, my steps hesitant, as if the house itself was alive and resisting my every move. The scratching continued, now accompanied by a soft tapping. It was as if something, or someone, was moving just beyond the walls, waiting. My breath caught in my throat. I couldn't bring myself to look, but I just knew, that I was not alone. I walked to the kitchen, trying to stay calm, trying to steady my breathing, but my hands were shaking uncontrollably. I opened the cupboard, grabbed a knife. I didn't know what I thought I would do with it, but I couldn't leave myself defenseless. The scratching grew louder, closer, and then it stopped. The house fell into a suffocating silence, and I stood there, my heart thudding in my ears. I didn't dare move. My eyes darted around the kitchen, searching for anything out of place, anything that could explain the noises. But there was nothing. The kitchen was dark and still. That's when I heard the whisper. It was soft at first, like a breath on the back of my neck, but it grew louder with each passing second until it was unmistakable. I'm still here. I spun around, but there was nothing. No one. The kitchen was empty. The voice had come from nowhere, yet it was so real, so close. I could feel the hairs on the back of my neck stand up, my blood running cold. The man was here in my house, in my mind, in my soul. I ran to the living room, but when I passed the window, I saw it again. The grin. His grin. It was outside, pressed against the glass, staring at me with those hollow eyes. I couldn't breathe. I was frozen. The figure was right there, just on the other side of the window, watching me. I grabbed my phone and tried to dial the police, but my fingers wouldn't cooperate. The screen flickered, then went dark. The battery was dead, but I had just charged it earlier. I tried again, but the same thing happened. The phone wouldn't work. The figure outside the window didn't move. It just stood there, its grin widening with every passing second. I wanted to run, to get away, but my legs wouldn't move. I was rooted to the spot, my entire body paralyzed by terror. The air was thick, suffocating, and every breath I took felt like it might be my last. Suddenly, the figure moved. It wasn't a simple step forward. It slithered toward the window, its body bending and contorting in unnatural ways, its skin stretching as if it were liquid. It pressed its face harder against the glass, the skin on its face scraping against it in a sound that sent a chill through my bones. I screamed, but no sound came out. The thing outside the window was no longer just looking at me. It was inside me, in my mind, in my thoughts, pulling at my very essence. I could feel its influence, its power, crawling under my skin like a parasite. It wanted me. It wanted everything. The grin on its face was stretching wider, wider than what should have been physically possible. The skin around its mouth began to rip, revealing rows of jagged yellow teeth that seemed to go on forever. It opened its mouth, a low, gurgling sound emanating from deep within its throat, and then silence. And then it smiled. That was the moment I realized I couldn't run anymore. It had me. It always had. This wasn't just a nightmare, a hallucination, or some kind of stress-induced madness. This was real. This thing, this grinning man, was real. I reached for the door, my hand trembling, my fingers numb. But before I could even touch the handle, the door burst open with a force that nearly sent me flying across the room. The figure was standing there in the doorway, grinning wider than ever. The air grew colder, the darkness around it thickening. I could feel it in my bones, in my heart. It was the end. There was no escape. But as it stepped forward, its hands stretching toward me, something inside me snapped. In a moment of sheer panic and adrenaline, I turned and ran for the stairs, my heart hammering in my chest. I didn't look back. I couldn't. I could feel the grin, the presence, following me, closer and closer. Every step I took, every breath I made, I could feel the weight of it pressing down on me. I reached the top of the stairs and slammed the door to my bedroom, locking it behind me. I collapsed onto the floor, gasping for air, my mind spinning, my body trembling uncontrollably. I could hear it, though. I could hear it outside the door. The scratching, the tapping, the whispers. It was still there, and it would never leave.